Okay.
Oh, I gotta say, got it. So either I leave or I continue on.
Please don't leave. Please don't leave.
I
We're
thought about it. I thought
Yes,
about
please don't leave.
it.
Okay. So this is the very first episode of this podcast. And I think that I need to address the elephant in the room, which is I am so nervous. Like,
Mm.
I'm so nervous. My heart is racing and I feel like my voice is wiggly. Is it wiggly? I feel
No,
like
it's
a
not
little bit.
wiggly. You're sounding like you. You're sounding like you.
Okay. I also know that, you're nervous because this is not
Mhm.
something that you normally do.
No.
And also, we have recently been talking a lot about imposter syndrome
Yeah.
and how we're both feeling that so profoundly at this period of our lives for whatever reason. Obviously, it comes up and goes away. It's like ocean waves, it kind of like goes in and out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I want to do a tiny little like ease the tension of this nervousness and just like acknowledge that both of us are feeling imposter syndrome, that both of us are feeling nervous, and that is actually there is enough space here for us to feel all these things and yet be very present with this amazing question that we have. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about what I just said? Because I feel like I just went on a little bit of a rant.
No, no. I just want to say, as soon as you started talking, I was like, um, I have this every time I sort of go on Instagram and I see something that you're doing that we don't talk about in our conversations. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait, you have a TV show?
Yeah,
Wait.
because we talk about things that
Yes.
really, really matter to us, like the TV show and the podcast and all that. That's just the stuff
Yeah.
that I'm doing. But the stuff that's really important to me is like my personal development. And
Yeah.
this is why we've been friends for so long.
Yeah.
It's what you care about the most too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I want to say that because my nervousness started to uh go down because I just feel such admiration for you. I like and just even the fact that you acknowledge that we're both nervous, I get kind of protective of you. I feel that like I'm because I know you. And so I think about all the things you've done in your life and I'm like I'm sort of in the background there, um wanting to remind you or to have those conversations where we're like, we've got this, which kind of feels like what this is hopefully going to be about for me, right? Because, I struggle with the very similar stuff.
Yeah. It's like we're in tandem sometimes. Like, I'll
Yes.
talk to you about something that I'm struggling with, and you're like, well, that was my last week, so we don't need to talk about me.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so as we're talking about right before we hit record, it's just our intention with this question and this podcast even is just to be able to be as vulnerable and honest as possible with
Mm.
our own stories in the hopes that the question asker would just maybe not feel so alone in it and not feel like, am I the only one that's going through this? Because both of us have gone through this exact same thing. And I think that you're in a different stage of it. And I
Mm.
was really struggling with it for many, many years while I was going through career pivots. But in terms of your recently pivoted career, I remember you wanting to make a change with your career for, I would say, 10 years.
Yes. Yeah. Probably 10 more, maybe even more, but yeah.
Yeah, the first inklings were maybe even
Mm.
longer than that.
Mm.
And what eventually made you decide to jump from your original career that you'd had for what, 30 years?
Probably 20. Oh, and the interesting thing is, I went back and forth between the two jobs, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I started as a teacher in 93 and then was asked by a mentor to move into the other role that I had in the system, which was school counseling. Um, I I don't know if I've ever felt not imposter syndrome in either of those roles, but that I think has more to do with the messages that I tell myself and continue to tell myself too. So when you ask the question, like, what made me make that, you said what made me make the move, right? Like eventually do
Yeah,
it.
eventually move because you moved
So
from your original career. I'm trying to create some context too, because I realized that like the listener actually doesn't know us. So you were in the school system for 20 something years,
yeah, 30, almost 30.
for
Still
almost
am. Yeah,
years.
yeah.
Yes. And you decided to sell your apartment and move
Mm-hmm.
your husband over to the island.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really hard decision to make. I watched you go through that for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what was the clincher? Like, what made you actually move?
Um, there were a few things, but this has been something that I has propelled me, whether it's good or bad, almost every time. And that's what the pain of where I am is stronger than the pain of making the change. And you and I have talked about that, right? But the number of times, and I write in my journal a lot, the number of times I woke up and I was like, I can't, I'm not happy. Something's not feeling right. I'm not doing the job the way that I want to do the job. I always said that if I ever didn't like working with teenagers, like because my job was working with teenagers, that would be it. I could quit. But I never stopped liking working with the teenagers. That like the kids that I got to work with, right? That was always the best part of it. Um, so what happened is there a whole bunch of family stuff happened, and aging parents and things like that. But really, it was excruciatingly painful. Lots of tears, feeling it sort of seep into other parts of my life. So it was hard to be social. It was hard um, to not think about it when I wasn't at work, which is a real commitment to myself. Is like try to leave it at work and not think about it, and really just feel incredibly defeated,
Mhm.
really defeated. And it's still a very scary thing. I don't regret the move. I don't regret leaving, but I'm still, me, I'm still hanging on to a part of it, right? Even here. Um, I really loved what the writer, the person who wrote the question and said about the golden handcuffs, because it's a real struggle when you're in a situation where those kind of things are there and they're possible and they're happening in at retirement or whatever. I think that's what the golden handcuffs is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think golden handcuffs could refer to a few things. Some are like you're in a company for so long that every year you stay, they actually give you more stock
Yes.
options, and then
Yeah.
but it's always financial.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
always, I think, hits the nerve of financial fear, of
Yes.
financial instability, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a long ago message. My mom grew up in absolute poverty, and my dad not didn't fare all that much better. But that message all through was about money and about making sure you're stable and secure, making sure you don't owe too much, making sure that you can do what you need to do in order to take care of yourself. And so exploring that and seeing whether it's possible to take care of myself and be financially responsible in another career, it just did not seem possible because it would be kind of foolish to give it up. And that wasn't really necessarily the message I was getting from some people, but there's always someone that has that message. There's always someone that says, what are you thinking about? Look at all the good stuff that you have here, right? And it makes it really hard to sort of sift through to see, yes, but is it possible that I could also be successful and be happy doing something else?
Mhm. And for you, I think if I remember correctly, like the financial stability had to do with not only the steady paycheck, but also the pension.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Which is,
so,
yeah.
yeah, so knowing that and leaving your job early knowing that there's not just the financial stability of right now, but there's also the financial stability of later.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
a thing. But
Yeah.
we were sort of talking the other day too about the idea that financial stability and the fear of not having enough is quite arbitrary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because some people really don't have a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us, especially in Canada or, in big city Vancouver, where, most of us actually aren't starving, or we're not suffering through a war, or having to be in hiding because of like religious persecution or things like that. We have enough to get by, most of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not feel like we're thriving, but we're not literally dying either. And so when we step back to look at how much we have and how much we're willing to risk, these are all very subjective things.
Absolutely.
Can you speak to that? Because I know we were talking about that the other day, and like how you were like, well, do I want to make a move? And
yeah. Well, and you and I have been talking for many, many years about this. I actually don't think it has a lot to do with money.
yeah.
I actually think it has probably nothing to do with financial security. I mean, yeah, I spent my career working with people that absolutely do struggle with money, and I see it, and I know the difference, and I know what that actually looks like, to be having to make choices between putting food on the table and spending time with your family, right? So I think that's where the sadness for me comes from, is because I know that it's not about really the money, and that's where I am. I feel like I've been here sometimes, like many times over the years, but that's really where I am, is that trust that it's the self stuff, right? It's the you got this piece, right? That other people see in me that I struggle with. And it's so ironic that a lot of my career is spent working with people that are working through this themselves and supporting them through it. It's actually a real privilege, because then I get to sort of go, note to self, Sandra. Yeah, check yourself here.
Yeah. But that is like, I mean, even Oprah says she's never had to go to therapy because she's interviewed all these people and that therapy,
Yeah. Yeah.
which really, I mean, that the amount of self-reflection that happens in those I guess relationships
Mm-hmm.
is so much.
But okay, like I think about thinking about that time way back when you were leaving graphic design, and
Yeah.
that was, to me, that was, felt like that was a monumental shift from that job to the bakery, right? And all, I mean, I remember what that whole time was like I talked about the fact that it was the pain of staying where I am was greater than the pain of trying to move forward, right? What was it for you?
Same. I have that
Yeah.
tattooed on my body. There's that quote
Oh.
by, yeah, I don't know if you remember, but there's that quote by Nace Nin, um, where it's like, gosh, I'm so bad at remembering quotes. It's like the pain of staying closed as a bud was more painful than the fear of blossoming.
Mm, mm,
And so it was exactly that. It was like this idea that I didn't want to hate my everyday life anymore. I
mm,
didn't want to wake up and feel like I wasn't my fullest self and
mm,
that I wasn't enjoying life. And I think I still feel that because, I mean, this is a topic for maybe another day, but you know, in cloudier years in the recent past, I've felt the same thing where I've woken up thinking, I don't I don't want to be where I am, but I don't know where I want to be. yet.
Mm,
So
mm.
I think I just didn't know even which direction to take myself, because all I knew was that I didn't want what was my present moment, but I had nowhere to walk, and so I think that's probably some part of the question askers, um I guess, like, point is that she doesn't even know. Why do I assume it's a she? I guess it's because I relate to her so much, or maybe
Mm.
he. I don't know what this, I don't know what I'm even talking about right now.
Well, I'm having difficulty finding a North Star.
Yes, yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I'll, I, there was no North Star.
yeah.
There was no, and I can think I really wanted that. This is it. This
Okay,
is now I know I'm out of here. I'm leaving, right?
I do a pause.
Sure.
Okay, sorry. I am so in my head right now that I think I need to start from the beginning. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
I'm so sorry. I'm
No.
feeling like I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm like paralyzed by my own like
Oh,
internal dialogue right now.
okay. Yeah. Oh, I don't, that
Okay.
sounds really painful. Yes.
Okay. Wait. Do we need to start over again? No, we don't. Do we?
I'm here. We can do whatever. I mean, you're making this really easy for me.
Really?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember my intention of not saying stuff that sounds all that impressive and just be my
Who you are.
incredibly messed up self.
Okay. So maybe what I'll do is I will cut after we talk about the imposter syndrome stuff a little bit.
Okay,
And let's just do a take two.
sounds good.
Because, and I don't even know if this is the right thing to do, but maybe it is. I have no clue.
Well, that sounds like career.
Yeah, that does, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay, so this is what I think we should do. Okay, I think that we need a bit more context about like where where what job you actually had and where you went. Like there maybe needs to be more context about that, because I'm
Sure.
like, maybe okay, this is my
Sure.
this is not for you.
Okay.
Sorry. And I know you're
Don't apologize. You don't, I know, just don't even think about it. It's a pleasure to be on this with you.
okay.
And it's gonna be amazing. And you're natural at this. You know that I think this.
I don't feel so natural right now, but anyway, okay. So tell me a little bit about the career that you had and
Okay.
where you recently pivoted to. I mean, I know this, but maybe tell the listener just for context.
Okay. Um, I started teaching in 1993, and I will say that even then, when we were thinking about careers and things, during my first practicum, I was basically told I should find another career um, by my advisor, because they could not see that I even would enjoy the job. They couldn't see, based on how I was showing up every day, that there was getting any pleasure from it. And they took me aside and said, either shape up in the last 2 days of this practicum or find another career.
What,
So
which
yeah.
is so surprising because you, in my opinion, are/were epic at what you did. Like you had created a safe space for teenagers. Arguably, I think the hardest period in life to reach someone is in their teenage years, at least for me, because I teenagers are like aliens to me. I have no idea how to talk to a teenager. You, yeah, you created this like incredible safe space in your drama classes for teens to work out the things that they were really struggling with. And these teens were struggling with
Stuff.
parents in poverty, like on the poverty line, uh, a lot of abuse issues and things
Yeah.
like that. And I remember going to these high school plays that you would write in the summertime so that these drama students could feel really seen and
Mm.
work out their personal issues and struggles through drama.
Mm.
Anyway, that's just an aside of how amazing you are. So the fact that someone told you like, hey, just maybe you shouldn't be doing this,
Just
like,
a heads up.
shocking to me.
Yeah. And it was, I will say though, that he was right. That the advisor was right in that moment. And it was a lot of what I still struggle with today. Thank you for saying that. I know that I forget that you've sort of seen me in that element and in that role that I eventually, because I made it through my practicum, obviously. And the just the gift it was to be able to work with kids. And it's teenage stuff. It didn't even have to be brutal hard stuff. It was just, I hate being 14, or it's really hard to be 13 and not, have sometimes a voice or whatever, right? But what he saw in me in that practicum was what has stopped me from making a lot of decisions and choices in my life. And it was that fear, the fear of screwing up, the fear of not being successful, the fear of not doing it perfectly. That was a really big piece for me. And after I was told that, like, figure it out in these last 2 days, or I'm going to ask for you to not be here for the longer practicum. It shifted something in me, and I was crying on the phone to my dad, and my dad said, I don't know what to tell you, Sandra, because teaching is hard. It's really hard, and there's nothing I can tell you to pretend that it's going to be easy. And that also shifted in me, because I knew it was hard, but I also knew that I wanted to do it. And so I went,
What was
what?
what was the hardest part about it?
Well, there's a whole bunch of hard, right? Like, there's a whole bunch. But for me, it was, I was doing a practicum on the east side of Vancouver. I came from from Victoria, and I had all these preconceived notions about what it would look like or what it would be like, and everything was that I thought was it was going to be was wrong. And I was so wanting to be liked, or for them to know me right away without having to explain who I was. And that's not how it rolls with people, especially with young people. It's like, I don't know you. And I was really paralyzed at showing myself. And I had, like, the whole insecurities that I had forever. And they were just really showing up in the front, trying to teach something, trying to connect with them. And after he said that, I just went in and started acting. I started acting like I had confidence. I started acting like I believed I could connect. And through the acting, as if it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, that advisor was the reason that I got my first job in another school, and where I stayed for most of my career was in that school. And yeah.
So why did you leave and move back to Victoria?
So, well, a lot of it was to do with, my dad's health, and wanting to be there to support my family. There's a lot of health problems for a couple of people that I care about, and also I just needed more quiet, because where I was living and what was happening was a little bit was too much. But also, I really struggled within the system, because I moved into the counseling piece, and I really struggled with what the expectations of a school counselor are versus what I wanted to do with my time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the pivot's been now, has been, I am creating more opportunity to do the work and have the conversations and have the connections that I want to have. And it's not in the system. It's not there.
Yeah, I remember you were talking about shifting careers for probably a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a misnomer that these shifts happen really quickly and
Mm.
that people just jump. for me at least, my experience has always been that I think about something and it slowly bubbles for about a decade.
Yeah.
Even this podcast I've been thinking about for about a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally one day you just run out of reasons why not.
Yeah.
Or you get so sick of where you are that you feel like you have less to lose by just going forward.
Or even uh, more things fall into place that answer the question about whether it's time. You
Yeah.
know, like it's, oh, it was family, or the city's getting really loud, where we're living is getting really loud. There's someone that lives above us now, has really heavy feet. Like all of these things started like that started to fall. It's like, okay, well, maybe I can sort of revisit this plan I had to do something different.
And just like the asker, that that career shift or pivot was sort of made for that decision was sort of made for her because she was impacted
Mm-hmm.
by a layoff. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when I think when we're meant to do something, the stars just align. And sometimes the stars aligning look like they suck in the moment, but actually it's kind of a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, with my divorce, in the moment I was not feeling like a marriage failing was my greatest blessing. But actually, it was the one probably most pivotal learning experience I had was being in a marriage that was very, very challenging.
Yeah. I will say too, just thinking about that, how many conversations we would have about the things that you were going to try as well in that, right? Like I can shift this, or I understand this, and so maybe I need to think about it this way, right? Like the number of conversations we had around, I'm gonna, I'm in it, right? I'm gonna, I want to just try, right?
And
Until,
yeah, until we there's nothing else to try.
yeah.
We do the same things with anything important to us, like our careers, where we're like, well, maybe I don't hate it so much. Or maybe if I just shifted my own perspective in this way,
Yes.
maybe it would work. Maybe, and it's just, and it actually, all of that trying works. It's almost like it works out the kinks
Mm-hmm.
of what we actually truly desire in the end. Even if we leave not knowing what we desire next, it's all a part of like the forming of an image, like the blurry focus coming into focus each time we do that trying. It's like, oh no, actually it's over here. Oh, okay, wait, and so we end up figuring it out through that process. So none of it's wasted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um So when you decided to go into private practice as a counselor,
Mm.
I know that that was a really scary thing for you because of the financial piece, which the
Mhm.
asker touches on. Having had a steady paycheck for 30 years, plus the pension, which is the financial security for later, going into something like private practice where essentially you're an entrepreneur. What
Yeah,
were,
contractor.
yeah, how was that shift for you, and what was that like to overcome that fear? Because I think entrepreneurship is very scary for someone who's never done it.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a huge learning curve for me because I know nothing. I spent my whole career in a with an employer, and things were taken care of by that employer that are now essentially my responsibility, right? Um, So I mean, I'm not 100% sure that I actually have handled it entirely because, like I'm still hanging on to a few days in a school system, partly because I do like that connection and I like what I get to do, but also because it is very scary. I would say one of the things that really helped was to really realistically look at how much I need to survive. And I that was a conversation I did not have just in my head. I spoke with, well, my husband in particular, and we hash it out, right? Like, we make sure I don't want to do anything that's going to put him or myself in a difficult position if something also were to come up, right? Like, that we needed to be able to figure out financially. So there's a lot of conversations about that. But also the driving force was there was a really weird, good feeling about it. Like, as scary as it was, there was also this huge excitement and relief, like excitement that I did not feel like stuck, and excitement that this was something new. And also it really aligns with what I love to do, which is like work with people in that kind of space where you have time that is not interrupted by phones or another person coming knocking at the door saying we got to go here, or this person has to go back to class or whatever, right? Like, it's like everything that I loved about what I do in the system, the school system, I'm able to sort of bring myself into it. And it's still scary. It's still like I'm there's a lot to learn. But also it's like I know the difference when I walk out of a day that I've spent working for myself and doing this. It just feels better. It feels better.
Do you feel more yourself? Do you feel more energized? Do you feel like, what is that feeling?
That's funny that you would say, do I feel more myself? Because that's always the struggle. Even with this podcast, we already talked about this. Like, that's a constant awareness of mine, is like, okay, am I showing up just as I am, or am I pretending that I know more than I do? And when in my role now, people are coming to work through things with the expectation that I have information or I have a background that could support them, and I do have that background, but every person is different, right? So for me, there is a moment that several moments that I have to take and go, you have enough information. You have enough, and if you do not have the information, then you will find out what the information is, because the ultimate thing is that you want to be of service here. Like, that's it, right? And honestly, it really isn't about the money. I know that sounds kind of off topic, really, but
Really, the financial
okay.
thing is a huge part,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. But it's sort of letting go of what I think it should look like, for one thing, and just and I find that actually very easy when I'm in the private piece or in a session. I found that easy in the school system. When a kid came into my office, it was like nothing else was going on. It was just that. And now I get that same experience here. Like, all the worries I have, all the self-doubt, everything, if I'm doing what I genuinely connect with, those things are so small. As soon as the session's over, they all come back.
Yeah.
But in that moment, and that's the thing for me. Like, if when I'm actually doing the work that I want to do, if that fear and those worries about showing up, who I am, perfectionism, all that crap that gets into my head, if it doesn't happen when I'm actually doing the work, then that's a good sign. That's something to move towards.
It's like all the outside stuff, the outside projection stuff dies away or gets muted. And I really do think that when you're in that place, you are in like a zone of connectedness with yourself, and everything on the outside, inferring what we should be, how we should feel, how we should be approaching this, all those self-doubts, which are all exterior going in, right? I think when you're in that zone, it's just you doing you. And that is what I for myself, that's my biggest indicator of when I'm doing the absolute best thing for me.
Yeah.
That I'm exercising myself in the perfect way, crafted exactly how I should be doing it. I always think of like a dog when it doesn't get exercised, it just starts tearing up the couch.
Mm.
And I always say that I'm like a dog that needs to be properly exercised, or else I'm just like an unhappy person. I need to be doing things in my zone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone really does. Like, I think everyone has a zone where they
Mm-hmm.
feel so connected, and like the world falls away when they're doing that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest thing is to actually find what that is.
Absolutely. And giving yourself the time to find, like, it sounds like, I don't know. Yeah, like just giving a lot, like that there be time to do that, because I think, like, if I'm in my job, and it's very hard to carve out time to even start to consider what it might look like to find that thing that makes me feel that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Just as I'm saying that, I realize, and the hard part about leaving the job that I left is because I still did have those moments. And it was the moments that I got to, work with the kids, the doors closed, and we're working through something. So I was like, yeah, I do get that. But the hard part was that everything else outside the door was getting bigger and bigger and more intrusive and more often. And
Mm-hmm.
so that had a huge impact.
And now with private practice, it's almost like you found a way to lessen the things that you that don't um, energize you,
Mm-hmm.
and increase the things that do, because there's
Yeah,
always going to be something in a job that doesn't energize us, like always.
totally.
Like, I don't
Yeah.
like, talking to my bookkeeper, but I do because I need
Yeah.
to happen. But like crafting, and I think that comes with the maturity of like knowing yourself, but also with the maturity of understanding that careers are such infinite combinations of things that we can actually go, that one piece doesn't work, how can I find a solution to not do that thing or not make it necessary? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it totally does.
Yeah, like, yeah.
Well, the other piece that I was thinking about is, um, because I've known you for a very long time and seen you move through and do a lot of different careers, but what's not seen is the incredible amount of work that went in to making those careers happen, right? Like, I think it's one thing, like, I see you and I see the things that you've done, but I also remember the work. And I'm thinking in my practice now, um, the amount of stuff that I'm doing, that the amount of time that's taken up that is not paid for me to be able to show up now, right? And finding that, I don't even know if it's a balance, right? But it's like, it sort of it sort of winds down to what is driving my heart. Like, am I, because if it's driving my heart, then I'm willing to put in the work, right?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I remember getting some advice a long time ago that just said, there are three buckets: things that you are horrible at and you don't like to do, things that you are good at but you don't like to do, and things that you are excellent at and you love to do. And number one, find someone else to do the stuff that you're not good at and you don't like to do.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Number two, the stuff that you can do well, but you hate doing in the beginning when it's needed, do it. But the goal is to eventually get someone else to do that when you're financially, like when the
Mm.
financial model works, so that you can focus on the stuff that really does light you up. But it's obviously not always possible. But the goal is that you end up creating a model that you are really just doing the things that truly light you up, or that you can do those things well in order to enable you to do the things that light you up. So that was a really crucial thing. When I think about my careers, I always think, how much time am I going to spend doing the thing that I love, and how much time am I going to spend doing the thing I don't love? Because if it's like 50-50 and I don't think it's worth it, sometimes I'll just think, well, that's a great hobby then.
Mm.
Like, I don't need to do that as a career. But this is one thing that kind of reminds me of what you were doing when you were exploring your acting.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge potential pivot for you.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you decided not to pursue it. And you were actually doing really well, getting casted in all these different roles. And I know drama and acting had always been a real interest for you. And what I love about what you did was that you just started. You were like, I'm going to go take some improv classes. Improv classes turned into improv workshops with other people that were professionals, turned into, hey, Jackie, I'm going to go and get my headshot and do a book or a reel or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Into, I just got casted for this role in these movies where I just stand out in the cold for like 6 hours or something. And it was really going for a while. And I feel like that is such a great example of what exploring a pivot actually looks like and not pivoting. Because sometimes we explore pivots
True.
times before we actually pivot.
Well, I think I explored the pivot without much financial gain.
Yes,
yes, that was a big piece too. I mean, I remember, and I was thinking that when you said something earlier. I have some friends that are actors, and they're not like, like, what is it, 3% or 1% of actors in the Screen Actors Guild make over $10,000 a year. That was an old statistic, but it's not probably. I mean, and so one of my friends in particular, they go through lots of spots where there's not a lot of roles coming in, and then they'll get something big on a show, and that sort of sustains them. But there's no question that they're doing that, and there's no question they don't want to do anything else, right? It's going to be about that, right? And that willingness to be there. For me, the pivot, there was other parts of like standing in freezing cold river for an entire day and almost getting frostbite. That was a real clincher, I think. Like, I was like, I don't know. I like performance and I like that to be part of it, but I'm good. I
think that's exactly how we explore what careers we want to do.
Yeah.
Because there are times where I will actually write out full business plans with the intention of starting the business. And then after I write the business plan, I'm like, wow, that's going to take a lot of work. And I'm like, no, not worth it. I don't want it bad enough.
Yeah.
And then there are like 10 businesses, 20 businesses that I've written business plans for that I've never started and I never want to start. But at least now I know, because I've gone through the process of exploring it to its absolute point of surety.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you did that too, because for a long time you're like, should I be an actress? Should I do this? And you went all the way to the point where you were standing in a cold river and getting frostbite. And you're like, yeah, I like this, but a hobby is great too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is all a part of, I think, discovering what you want to do. The other part of, sorry.
I was just going to say the other part of it for me, which the business piece of being an actor, that was not what I wanted to do. I like the performance piece. I like the being a part of a creative community, the connections, the camaraderie, everything that comes with it, right? But the other part, which is really building your career, and I know how hard that is. I watch people do that, and it's just amazing to see it when it happens. Like even for yourself, right? Like the work that you put into that. That was the difference between that and what I'm doing now. Is like, I did not have an interest in doing that for that work then. I do have the interest in what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Yeah.
And it's the same stuff, but it's for a different purpose.
Absolutely.
Also, like you mentioned that you weren't making a lot of money doing acting, but I would say that almost with every single career that I ventured into, almost every single one, the money didn't come in the beginning.
Yeah.
I was doing farmers markets, as you remember, because you worked farmers markets with me, out in
New
like
Westminster, so much fun.
West. Like we would drive out there so early and you would be hawking pastries and baked goods. Thank you so much. You're such a good friend. It's crazy. Um, but I was like doing all-nighters baking for a farmers
Mm,
market for years.
mhm.
And the money part was just like, if I can break even doing this hobby, I'm golden because it was just fun to do. And even with Boku, I was like planning to not make money for like the first 3 years because I was like, but I felt like it's still worth doing. I still
Mm,
want to do it knowing that I could go bankrupt. I'm
mm,
still, and even with this podcast, I'm like fully understand that I'm probably not going to be the next podcast sensation, but I'm like, I'm willing to invest this amount of money into this because it's something I'm really passionate about doing right now.
mm.
And let's test it out. And maybe like in a year, I'll think, oh, that was fun. On to something else. It doesn't need to be
Absolutely.
so final. I think that's the other thing with choosing a next career or exploring the possibilities of new careers is that
Yeah.
it's it's always, now this is easier said than done, but it's always best done with an element of lightness and exploration.
Mm,
Like with the attitude, the exact same feeling as when you go on vacation and you're like, ooh, that restaurant looks good. Let's try it out. Oh my gosh, I've never had this food. Let's try it out. What's down that alley? I want to go and look. The sun down there looks really beautiful. Ooh, I just found this amazing hidden garden. Cool. Like
mm.
exploring your career, if you have the ability to, is best done with that attitude. Also, most of the time, I have never switched careers while having no safety net.
Yeah. Yeah.
I started baking when I was still doing design,
Yeah.
and you did acting while you were still working
Yeah.
your day job,
Yeah.
and you are still working in the school system part-time in order to make sure that you have a safety net for your private practice just in
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so sometimes these pivots don't need to look like we're jumping off a cliff.
Mm.
Sometimes they just look like, let's explore this while I do this other thing that I know is going to give me the freedom and the peace of mind to be able to explore, because fear is the one thing that will stop exploration and creativity.
Yeah. You made me think about actually a couple of students who have done that over the years, because I've kept in touch with some students over the years, um, and e some of them did not have a safety net necessarily, but they were willing to adjust their lives to because it was so important to them to, and most of it had to do around starting their own businesses. And so I remember, like, there is fear because they didn't have the money, but they also were willing to see, I could live with this amount to pay my bills. And I wanted for this many years to see if it would work. And interestingly, for the two that I'm thinking about, it has,
Mhm.
right. And it is like, does take time, but they weren't able because of circumstances necessarily to make a change and have that safety net, but it was so important to them that they gave themselves a certain amount of time, and
Mhm.
if it didn't work, then they, you know.
Yeah, I think the certain amount of time part is a huge one that I've always done for myself. So even with this podcast, I'm like, I'm going to give myself a year
Hmm.
and then check in. Does it still check all the boxes? Like, do I still feel really energized and passionate about this? Because that's the purpose, that's the reason why I'm doing it. Is it sustainable from a financial perspective? Like, am I breaking even? That's, another checkpoint. Another one is, do I feel like there is some momentum of growth, whether it's I'm growing or the podcast is growing, or I feel like listeners are giving me feedback that they're growing, so that there's some momentum. Because I think when things are stagnant, they sort of die. Like, so there's always like markers of, look, I'm going to be able to give myself an out if it's not working, and to give myself that time limit of a year or very measurable milestones, like until I reach this mark. And if I'm not feeling it, I think too often people define failure in ways that tie their feet to something that they don't want. And it's like, what is failure? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
we're all just testing this stuff out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I feel like we've like explored some stuff here. If you were to answer this asker's question directly, what do you think you would say? Advice on finding a new career, knowing that they are obviously worried about the financial risks. What would your advice be from your own experience?
Well, the whole, if not for the financial risks piece, is a hard one to overcome for me, right? Like if that sounds like that's a real legitimate and real concern, right? So I mean, I like what you said about is it possible to include it as a hobby somehow, like to start as it being a hobby, that it doesn't have to be your job, right? Or to just learn more about whatever that career is. Like for me, it was starting with the courses and starting with the classes and talking. I did a lot of talking to people who were in the job. I started training for this job now while I was in another job taking courses. It was a lot, but I was still trying to, do that. Again, though, the financial risk piece is a really hard one because it's a legit fear, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not one to say, just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's not helpful for me. And I don't imagine it would be helpful for many. I really can appreciate the feeling of also feeling stuck. Um, just sort of thinking about my own transition to a different career. I really became very intentional about finding the things that matter to me in the job that I was currently doing,
Mhm.
because otherwise it was not, I couldn't do it. So I really started to focus, and I actually started to shift my job so that I was doing more of what I really liked in the job that I was in, even though it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. Um, so this is a really long-winded answer, but I just wanted to acknowledge the stuck feeling, and the financial risk piece is I get that.
Yeah, I think the financial risk piece, like I said, like any fear will stop the freedom of exploration.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the way that I deal with any fear, um, which has changed recently because of having a baby, but the way that my go-to way of dealing with fears is I really am honest with myself about exactly what the fear is.
Yeah.
And you drill down to, okay, what is it really like? Because sometimes if you say, like, I'm worried about money, sometimes worrying about money is not just about money, it's worrying about, well, what if I don't have money and I'm embarrassed and someone shames me for not being good enough or not being successful, and I've always been the successful person. Or
Hmm.
the financial piece could be, my parents grew up really poor and I never want to be sad the way that my dad was sad, or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so when you really drill it down to, like, where does this fear actually come from? And then after that, what you're dealing with. And then what your worst case scenario would be. So my financial fears are usually, if I were to like really drill it down, because obviously I have financial fears as well, like everyone, it's what if I can't be impressive anymore? And the reason why impressive is important for me is because when I was a child, I'm not blaming my family at all, but this was just my experience. There was just so little time because they were dealing with so much as immigrant parents. We grew up with 10 people in our house. There was so little time for me to be acknowledged or noticed as a human being that I was only ever noticed when I was impressive, when I did something outstanding. And because Chinese families are all about financial security, having financial security and being wealthy is outstanding too. And so I think my financial fears drill down to, what if I can't be outstanding? Meaning I will never be loved. I will never have the opportunity to be loved or seen. And obviously, I don't think this in my mental head, but I think it in my heart, in my like body. And it's a struggle all the time to overcome that. But anyway, back to the point, is like when you outline your fear. Sorry,
No,
please.
I was just going to say, like, I really like what you said there too about the what is that financial fear? Because I mean, the person that's written in has said, if not for the financial risks, and I got stuck on that, but then I don't even know what that actually means to them. Like, you know, because like we talked a couple weeks ago about how gazillionaires still fear sometimes that they don't have, right? So it doesn't, I guess it's like defining it for myself and moving out of that fear place to truth, to the logic around it, right? And that's why for me it was really sitting with someone else. I cannot do this in my own head. That's why I reach out to you or I talk with my husband, right? Like I need to look at it realistically and not keep it, because once it gets in here and it stays and I start to go through all my fears start to get attached, right? And it used to be about finances, but actually it's not about finances anymore. It's really about X, Y, and Z. So I guess for me, the piece about like financial fear, is it really? And if it is, okay, that helps to know that. But if it isn't, for me, that's been a relief. It's been a relief to go, actually, this is just something completely else that I got to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, if we follow that fear all the way to the end, then we can actually challenge the truth of the essence of it, right? Like, is it true that if I was not impressive, no one would ever love me? And I know without a shadow of a doubt, I am sitting here talking to one person that will always love me. Like, and that is like my baseline, right? And then once we start diffusing that fear, because once you shed light on anything, it diffuses its power. Once we diffuse that power of that fear, then you can actually start looking at the finances in black and white.
Yeah, the black and white piece. Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually start going, okay, what are my expenses? And what is my financial status? And is it true that I can't make this thing work that I really want? Or is it worth it to make it work? That was the other question we were talking about. But without clearing that emotional space around finances and around the fear, I don't think it's even possible to look at your financial situation in black and white to begin with. And without looking at that, it's hard to then play in the world to discover what a new career looks like, because actually discovering a new career, I think, requires play. I don't know, just for me.
Yeah.
Did you feel that way with like the acting?
Well, yes. And also, like I said, I haven't, it was interesting to talk about this because I didn't move into private practice without exploring. I like to look at it more as exploring. I don't know. I'm going to play. I don't do that.
What? What's wrong with play? I mean, I don't really play either. You know me. I'm so
Yeah,
serious all the
I
time.
know.
What are we talking about?
Yes.
What is this play word?
But the exploring part, and I don't even think I knew that I was doing that, but I'm like, I'm going to take this class. Oh, I'm going to study this theory. Oh, I'm going to read this book.
Yeah.
And it was when I was doing that, I'm like, actually, I like this. I like and talking to people who are doing the career, I'm like, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
And I've got the education for it. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna apply, and I'm gonna apply for my accreditation, right? So yeah, but it wasn't like I'm just doing it.
Yeah.
It was I'm gonna check out some stuff just to make sure, because of this deep-seated fear of mine.
Yeah. And these things, I mean, we were just talking the other day about how you're like, I really want to study this like theory in therapy.
Yeah.
I just want that. And we talked about like, okay, well, what will it take for you to create the space in your life to make
Mm.
that happen? Because you're obviously still exploring. Well, no, wait, you're obviously still playing. No, just
I'm gonna go
so
play.
yeah. So that's another piece. It's like, what do we need to do to create the amount of space
Mm,
where that space is potentially doing nothing, which
mm,
turns into something
yeah.
times, which is also very hard. I'm not very good at that, but I've had to force myself to do
Yeah.
it when trying to find a new career, especially after I sold Boku. The
Mm-hmm.
book came out and I had years where there was just nothing going on. And I was like, well, what do I do now, guys? Anyone got some ideas? Everyone's like, you can do anything you want. Just do it. I'm like,
Yeah, but wait, wasn't that the time where you were still doing the apartment Lafayette?
yes.
So there was stuff I remember, because we had a lot of conversation with it, but I'm like, wait, look at this apartment that you're figuring out. Like, that was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely my exploration, but it was also therapy for me.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
was
Yeah.
so burnt out
Yeah.
from doing all the careers that I just needed.
Mm-hmm.
I think subconsciously, my body was creating a space where I could heal and rest. And that's another piece to this is I think, don't negate that our bodies know much more than our minds sometimes.
Yes. Darn
And
it.
that our bodies, if you listen to your gut and like, ooh, that looks interesting, or ooh, those end up leading you to the most profound experiences. Not and finding a new career is usually not done with the let me like make a list of all the potential careers that I could have, and then check and
Mm-hmm.
carry the one. And like it's not usually like that.
Well, I did, when I was doing career life connections with my grade 12s a couple of years ago. I took that career aptitude test,
Yeah.
and
Oh, what did it say?
um, well, park ranger and clown.
Oh, well, seeing as how you don't like to play, clown might be off the table.
But in yes, counselor was still really high up there, but it was not first. Park ranger was first.
I wonder what,
So
if I took this test, I wonder what it would say for me.
that would be cool. You should try that, actually.
What do you think it would say? I mean, it gives you pretty limited, these career aptitude tests give you like a very limited
Yeah.
amount of choices. I mean, but if clown was in there, then it must be relatively wide.
Yeah, it was low. It was lower than park ranger. I think it would still go entrepreneurial for you, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
yeah. I don't know what it would look like. It would say something about entrepreneur business, um, but it might give you a more specific area of business.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I just like making things.
yeah, yeah.
That's
And
really,
I don't.
I'll make them.
Yes,
Don't worry, I'll
yes.
make them for the both of us.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any last thoughts on the question from Wisdom Seeker?
Um, no, well, first of all, just thank you. I think this is a really cool structure that you have, that someone writes in with this, and I think I'm sure that it's a question that many people have. I also, the fact that the person has been laid off, I just also want to say that that comes with its own real struggles, right? So yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's huge.
just saying thank you. I thought this was a really neat opportunity, and hopefully they'll get a chance sometime to also come and talk to you.
I would love that. I think it's such a cool. I would love to talk to this person in the future and see the bigger details of what was going on for
For
them,
sure.
and
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
ask them, hey, where did these financial fears come from? I mean, not everyone wants to dig into that,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
man, that is my jam. I want to know where everyone's financial fears are coming from. Anyway,
Yes.
cool. Well, thank you so much, as always,
Mm,
for being there, and also just for supporting me. Because I know part of this, you probably would have said no unless it was for supporting me, if it weren't for supporting me, sorry. So I just want to thank you for that. And you're always so wise, and yeah, appreciate
right.
you.
Well, right back at you. I couldn't do this world without you. So
You. Thanks.
yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna say bye and pause recording. I'm gonna pause the recording.
Mhm.
Pause.